Hello everybody and welcome back to another Urza's AI review stream as we head in once more to see what the AI has cooked up for us. It's the fourth episode now. I'm going to stop including the rating explanations. If you do want to see those, then I'd recommend looking back in the start of the series. I'll post that up there. But yeah, without much further ado, let us get into it and see what the AI has for us today. All right, here we go. Looks like we're starting off with a blue card once more. We got Poltergeist, a 1 in the blue creature spirit, 1/1. Okay. It's flying, that's nice. And when Poltergeist enters the battlefield, draw a card. Okay. Nothing too complicated here, but not terrible. Let's see. So we got a 2-mana 1/1 flyer. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card. Brings to mind Baleful Strix, which is quite a powerful effect, but certainly not one that's unbalanced. So I could see Poltergeist existing. Let's see. Let's talk about design here for a bit. So we got a spirit. Poltergeist being a spirit, that makes sense. I like that. It has flying. That's good, I suppose. When it enters battlefield, draw a card. I'm not sure how that necessarily connects to the idea of a poltergeist. Poltergeists are usually known for throwing things around, stuff like that, haunting places. So not sure why drawing necessarily makes sense. Maybe it would be better to have a discard or something. Also, I think there's a card named Poltergeist already. No, I think I might have something else in front of the name. But anyway, Poltergeist seems more like a black spirit than a blue spirit, if I had to be pedantic about it. And because they are typically more on the evil side, and the sort of evil undead are more in the black domain. Blue spirits tend to be more neutral or like weirdly knowledge based and stuff. So a little bit of a like it's not a color pie break in that the abilities don't do anything that they shouldn't on a blue card. It's just the name really. So I'm not sure if I should be docking design or flavor for that. Otherwise, the card is again fine. It's really similar to Baleful Strix. It's not the most interesting, but I guess it's also an upgrade over Elvish Mystic in that it's blue. I mean, I don't know a ton about Constructed, but I imagine there's Spirit decks that would happily run this thing because Spirit Tribal, I think, is a thing that exists. Doesn't Modern have a Spirits deck? I don't know. We'll have to do some research, but so Elvish Mystic gets played and it doesn't have flying, so it's even better. A little bit all over the map today with my talking points, but anyway, I think this is a 4 out of 5 on the design. It's like perfectly good. Everything's in color pie except the name maybe, and it's similar to effects we've had before, so that's the only reason it's not a slam dunk, because it's just not very original, but I think it all makes sense. Balance wise, I think we can pretty happily give this a 5. Again, it reminds me of Elvish Mystic and Baleful Strix, which are both good but not broken cards. Obviously, it's sort of right in the middle in that it has flying but doesn't have a death touch. It is only one color, whereas Baleful Strix is 2, which is a bit more of a stringent requirement. But I don't think putting flying on your random 1/1 cantrip guy is like so groundbreaking that it needs to take any hits on the balance there. I don't think this would break limited or constructed in any way. I think it would be quite happily playable in both formats. So 5 out of 5 in balance. I like it. Flavor, I think, is where this card is going to suffer a little bit. We got, like I mentioned already, I think Poltergeist should probably be a black card. Spirit still fits, that's good. The art's a little bit weird. I don't really know what's going on there. So I guess maybe this thing is the Poltergeist, this like shadow over here. Very strange angle on whatever is happening in this art. And let's look at the flavor text. The spirit's battle cry is the call of freedom. At least it's a sentence that parses into something that makes sense, but not sure how that has anything to do with poltergeists or with drawing a card. I guess it's very freeing to have more options in your hand. The Spirit's Battle Cries to Call Freedom. Yeah, mm, not much to salvage there. The art's a little bit confusing and weird. And the card should probably be black instead of blue. So I think I'm gonna be a little harsh on the flavor here, just because the art's pretty terrible and the flavor text is pretty terrible. I'm gonna give this a 2. Um, the flavor text at least mentions a spirit, so it gets something there, and I can be convinced that this art depicts a spirit, but they're both big stretches. So we're gonna give it a 2 on the flavor and move on from Poltergeist. See what the AI has for us next. All right, and our next card is black. We got Ogre's Judgment. Oh, I love the art already. It is an instant, and it has buyback without a cost. Right. Okay. Interesting. I think this card almost does something. So buyback should have a cost. I'll pop up some buyback cards somewhere over here, and you can kind of look at that. And you know what that means is when you play the spell, you can return it to your hand by paying the buyback cost. So normally, you know, it's basically just another form of kicker, right? Like so many mechanics in Magic. You pay some extra mana and have some extra effect. Now, of course, Ogre's Judgment here has no effect to begin with, and the buyback doesn't have a cost. So I guess for the sake of having something to talk about, let's assume this means it has a buyback of 0, so it always returns to your hand. In which case, that actually is sort of intriguing. It's definitely in the wrong color, and like not a lot about this card makes sense. But I could see a deck that wants to like trigger off spells. You know, I don't know, something built around, you know, prowess and monastery mentor, stuff like that. Wanting just a spell that they can play over and over, even if it does literally nothing. So I think a 2 mana instant that has no text and has buyback 0 would actually be kind of intriguing. I'm not sure if it's a good design necessarily, because you can only do kind of broken things with that. But it's certainly interesting. It gets my brain kind of going about, you know, what can I do with this. So I think I'm going to actually give this some points for originality. Unfortunately, again, the card didn't quite print buyback 0, it just says buyback, so we have to dock some points for not completing the rules text, and this is almost certainly something you'd want in blue. Blue is about doing this sort of weird, tricky stuff, not black. So yeah, I'm gonna give this a 3 on the design for having a really interesting idea executed very poorly. But I think there's something there that could be fun in the right sort of environment. Balance wise, it's pretty bad. This is a weird one because again, if we assume this is buyback 0, do nothing. I guess for limited rating, you'd have to have a really specific environment for it. But you know, in something like a set that brings back prowess as a sort of feature mechanic, I suppose the prowess creatures would have to be in black for that to really make a lot of sense with this particular card, but I could see this being a weird enabler. It's one of those cards that's difficult because for constructed purposes, you can't make it too cheap. Like 2 is already kind of risky, and 1 would certainly be busted. But in limited, even if you have a bunch of prowess guys, do you really want to pay 2 for this effect? Maybe it's still fine. I don't really know, and it's so specific based on the environment and deck that it's in that I honestly have no idea. Feel free to share in the comments what broken things you would do with Ogre's Judgment. But I'm gonna give it a 4 because I'm not really sure, but doesn't seem, at least in terms of limited. I think, you know, if you get like 2 or 3 prowess creatures out and then you double cast your Ogre's Judgment, like that's fine, right? It's not crazy. So I think 4 out of 5 balance. Much like our first card though, this definitely suffers on flavor. What does the Ogre's Judgment have to do with a do-nothing instant? Now I tell you, this won't be getting a score of 0 because I love this art. It's beautiful. And it does fit the name at the very least. That's something. Let's look at the flavor text. From your hand, it has no use, but it was a good choice for you. Oh, this flavor text. And that's by Gracilius, Vizier of the Old Ways. Wow, that's it's very much breaking the fourth wall here, this flavor text. It's telling you this card has absolutely no use, and yet it was a good choice for you. Ooh, I don't usually love fourth wall breaks, but um you know what? That's pretty cute. I'm sort of into this. I'm not sure who Gracillus is, but it's not really that relevant here. Man, so I was gonna sort of wreck this thing on flavor because of the name not really making any sense with the effect, but this flavor text is gold, absolutely, and just telling you you're playing this useless card. And I love this art. I mean, this is clearly this ogre, and there's like a bunch of people down here. Is this the Gatewatch? Is this Nissa over here with a little green overhead? Yeah, you got Liliana. I think there's Gideon there. Jace, Chandra. Yeah, this is the Gatewatch is getting smashed by the ogre. That's how I choose to see it anyway. The ogre's judging them, perhaps for playing weird cards. I don't know. Anyway, in a shocking twist, I'm giving Ogre's Judgment a 4 out of 5 on flavor because I love this art and this flavor text. I do have to dock a point for, again, the name not really making any sense with the effect of the card, but otherwise, pretty great. All right, let's move on to the next card. All right, up next we have the Clinging Hydra. Oof. I guess you don't really want to break up with the Hydra. It's very clingy. X and a green. All right. For creature Hydra 0/1. When Clinging Hydra dies, it deals X damage to each creature with flying. Ooh, that's a weird card. I mean, I immediately have to dock a little bit of design because this thing should certainly come in with, even if you decide not to do +1 counters, which would sort of be the traditional Hydra design. Um, it should have some sort of counters to remind us what X was, because as it stands, you can play this for whatever, 5 mana, X equals 4, and then 10 turns later when it dies, we have to somehow remember what the heck X was, and there's probably something in the rules of the game to account for that, but the counters would be a lot cleaner, and would give you some more ways to play with it as well if you could you could like proliferate or whatever. There's always cool things you can do with counters as opposed to just setting this value exactly when you cast it. Uh, but yeah, this is kind of an interesting idea. I'm not sure a Hydra is necessarily what should have this effect. I don't think Hydras typically have like reach or ways to deal with flyers too much. Though, of course, deal X to each creature with flying is a classic green effect all the way back to Hurricane. That one, of course, hurt players too, which is a bit out of color pie these days, but the hit all flying creatures effect certainly stuck around. So that part makes sense. I don't know why this frame's weird, but never mind that. Yeah, I kind of actually am into this design. Again, it should have counters of some kind, but it's sort of yeah, it's like this delayed hurricane. So you play this thing out, and then you have to find a way to kill it. So I guess you might want to put it in some sort of sacrifice deck, because otherwise, I don't know how you're getting your O1 killed. But that's sort of the tricky bit of it, I suppose. It is a little weak, and we can mention that in the balance. Maybe it should be like double X or something, but design-wise, I actually think this is kind of a fascinating card. Yeah, I think I'm gonna give this a 4 out of 5. Just the rules text needs to be cleaned up a little bit and include some kind of counters. And maybe this should be a Hydra. Maybe it should be some kind of weird archer. I'm not sure, but 4 out of 5. It intrigues me, and that's something that I value highly coming out of this AI. This is, yeah, I don't think we've seen this effect before exactly. So yeah, I'm gonna give this a 4 out of 5 out of balance. On balance, not bad at all. Or excuse me, on design, not on balance. The balance is bad. Let's get into that section here. Yeah, this card's very weak. Again, I've mentioned Hurricane. There have been similar effects printed since, and I think they haven't even been on creatures. It's usually like an ETB effect. This is pretty bad. So let's say your opponent has a couple of flyers. You're gonna have to spend, 3, 4, maybe 5 mana uh, to get your Clinging Hydra out, and it's just an 0/1, so it has very little effect on the board the turn you play it. Um, unless you have something in play to immediately sacrifice it, like your opponent's just going to get in with all their flyers because this thing can't block them. It would be kind of interesting, actually, this had a reach, so you can sort of block a flyer and then blow them all up. But as is, there's no incentive for them to not just stack with the flyers. So, I mean, I guess it stops maybe some of their ground attackers from coming in, but that's not very exciting. And then, yeah, you have to find a way to kill it off. So I think it's way too weak at the moment. It needs some other abilities. Reach would go a long way, I think. Yeah, maybe making it cheaper. So it could deal like double X damage to the creatures. So you can just play this for like 2 mana or 3 mana and be quite strong already in terms of damage it deals. Yeah, is this a 1? Is this like unplayably bad? It probably is. It would take a very specific sort of set of circumstances for me to put this in my deck. I would have to have a deck that has a decent amount of sacrifice effects, ideally for some kind of value, which has existed in the past, though it's usually not in green. The match or the environment would have to just have a lot of flyers that I need to deal with, and there aren't many in my deck. It's really, really specific for this to be even playable, and even then it's not like great, right? So I think this gets a 1 or a 2. I guess I'll give it a 2 on balance because I could conceive of an environment where this is at least a sideboard card. Your opponent's like the all flyers deck, and you have a way to sacrifice this. You're like, I kill like 3 creatures, and then you're not too unhappy if you did that, even if it was a little awkward to get there. So yeah, I'm gonna give Clinging Hydra a 2 on balance. All right, in terms of flavor, the Clinging Hydra. This art's fascinating. We'll come back to it. Let's read the flavor text. Those who hear the cries of the Hydra are thrown into the underworld. Ooh. I actually kind of like that. So when the Hydra dies, I guess it sort of cries out, and then it kills all the creatures with flying, and they're thrown into the underworld. Poetic. I don't hate it. This art style's interesting. I guess this would be from like the latest Kamigawa block or something. This looks very sort of cyberpunk. This Hydra looks like it's half robot. It does have like this tentacle going on here. It kind of has a wolf face, which is a little bit weird. Why is it clinging is the thing I'm struggling to understand. Is it because the flavor text seems to imply that it like has some sort of auditory effect, but clinging would imply that, I don't know, it explodes or something, and the pieces cling to you. I'm reaching here, and I'm not really finding anything. So I'm not in love with the name. The art's a little weird, but I don't hate it. The flavor text I think is pretty good. So this might be another 4. Actually, not too bad. I just don't like the name very much. But I could see the art working, and I do like the flavor text. So yeah, right. 4 out of 5 flavor. Some pretty decent cards so far. Let's see what we have next. All right, and here's our last card. Oh boy. All right, Spontaneous Act of Devastation. 1 in the blue. Affinity for artifacts or land grabs. The spell costs 1 less to cast for each artifact you control. I mean, that is the definition of affinity for artifacts, but I'm not sure what affinity for land grabs is. And then it counters target spell. Ooh. Ooh, that's pretty powerful. It's a strong effect. Um, okay. So we have a blue counterspell. Fine. It's an instant. That's good. Wouldn't want a sorcery counterspell. One in the blue. Affinity for artifacts. Okay, so obviously we have to dock some points for affinity for land grabs. I'm not sure what that would mean. Is it can I pick up my lands and make it cost less? I'm not sure what this is implying here. Oof. So this is interesting because balance-wise, this is broken. But in terms of design, I think if you made this cost substantially more, it could be interesting to have a counter spell that has affinity for artifacts. That could be kind of sweet. That might even already exist. I don't know. There certainly are quite a few cards with affinity. I'd have to check through my list, but yeah, I don't hate that as a design. It's just this is costed very badly, and the yeah, there's the awkward rules text that doesn't make any sense. So and and it is just a counter spell. There's nothing crazy happening here. Has a sort of interesting idea. It's a blue counter. I think this might actually be a 4. There's just the bit of like if you just removed the words or land grabs from this card, it might be a 5 on design. Like I said, it's just broken balance wise, but I actually don't hate it on design. 4 out of 5. Okay, balance. I've already said it's 2 mana counterspell. Obviously the card counterspell exists, but it costs double blue, and that is a relevant bit of its effect. It does mean it's harder to cast it early in the game. You kind of have to play decks that are a little bit more blue based to um, reliably cast it. This just costs 1 in the blue, so it's the same as like a mana leak, but it's just a hard counter. So that's a little bit too much, and then the fact that it has affinity, so it can even cost a single mana, is really too much. Having a 1 blue counter anything spell is much, much, much too powerful. It would probably, I mean, it would still be really, really strong in limited, but it would probably be okay. If you made it a rare, a mythic or something, so you don't see it too often, it wouldn't be the end of the world, but I think this would break constructed. Anything that plays artifacts would just slot this in, and 1 mana counter spell is just too good. We can't have that. I mean, sure, Force of Will exists, and it keeps certain formats in checks by being a 0 mana counter spell, but still, that one has some inherent card disadvantage and everything. And this is just too much. We can't have this effect. So 1 on balance, I guess, because it'd be okay in limited. All right. What about flavor? Spontaneous Act of Devastation. Not sure what that has to do with affinity for artifacts or land grabs or countering spells. I guess you could counter a spell by some devastation, but that sounds like a red name, not a blue one. The art does sort of look like a spontaneous act of devastation, so I don't hate that. What does the flavor text say? When you're done, every major arcane spell can't be broken. Aren't we in fact breaking a spell? This flavor text seems to imply the opposite of what we're actually doing. I'm not a huge fan of that. So, pretty poor. I like the art matches the name somewhat, but the name doesn't match the effect. The flavor text isn't great. So, I think I'm going to call this a 2 and be done with it. Thank you, Spontaneous Act of Devastation. That'll do it for you. All right, up next, I mentioned in the last video, if you want to see a card name be represented here, then leave a comment, and someone did. So thank you to Jura Jojo for this suggestion. And we're going to make the hot button. I'm going to leave out the dash. That was in the original comment because I think that might confuse the AI a little bit. But let's see what the hot button does. All right, here we go. The hot button tuna red instant. Hot button. Forgot the. Okay. Deals 1 damage to target creature. If you control a blue permanent, it deals 3 damage to that creature instead. Okay. Um Interesting. So it's a multicolor card without being a multicolor card, right? Because obviously the effect is quite a lot better with the blue permanent than without it. I think we've seen this type of effect before. Usually, hmm, I shouldn't say usually because I don't remember for a fact, but I know there have been like creatures in the past, or other permanents that have this sort of thing, which makes it a little bit more interesting because it can, if it's a static effect, like hey, this creature has +2/+2 or whatever. When you have a blue permanent, then you can sort of use that in more interesting ways, and that your opponent can remove. Like if you only have one permanent that matches the color, they could remove it in the middle of combat, or maybe you could flash a creature in or something, and change what the board state looks like, sort of, to make the game more interesting. Whereas the hot button, you're just gonna cast it and either have the blue thing or you don't, and it either does one thing or the other. So a little less interesting to use that mechanic on instant, I think, than a permanent type card. I'm not sure why the hot button in particular cares about blue cards, or is blue particularly associated with buttons. I'm not sure. So, it's taking a mechanic that really doesn't work great with instants, and it's not using it in a particularly interesting way. Um, but I can't dock too many points because it is a red instant that hits a creature. So design-wise, that's like you could print this card, maybe name and notwithstanding, but you could print this text and it wouldn't, yeah, it would work. It's just not very good or exciting. So I think I will still give it a 3 on the design, even though it's not maybe great, but it's not that horrible. So we'll call that a 3 design. Balance-wise, this is really weak. If I'm paying 3 mana, you would want my baseline to be more than 1 damage, and 3 being the payoff. Like, 3 mana deal 3 is a playable limited card, though usually you'd want some sort of rider on it, like, maybe get Scry or, I don't know, something. But yeah, 3 mana deal 3 is playable, but not great. But when you have to jump through a hoop to even get the 3 mana deal 3, that's not great. So either this needs to cost substantially less. This costs 1. It'd be kind of an interesting card, right? Because 1 mana deal 1, I guess, is really quite bad still. But then when it's a lightning bolt, I mean, you're pretty excited. So that's kind of interesting. Or you could just up the damage numbers. Maybe it's a 3 mana deal like 2 base. So it's like a really expensive shock, but then it can upgrade to maybe 4 or 5 damage, depending on how the toughness numbers line up in the set. So it could be salvaged, but right now it's really, really weak. So I'm going to give it a 2 on the balance, just because there are some numbers we can play with to make it a playable card. But at the moment, it's not very playable. If you're exactly blue-red, like, you might still run this, because if you can reliably have a blue permanent, it is a 3 mana deal 3, but nobody's excited about this, and it would be left in the sideboard, I feel, most of the time. Okay, flavor-wise, we got the hot button. I don't know what's going on in this art. I feel like it's trying to seduce me, but then it also freaks me out at the same time. Maybe it's awakening something inside me. Anyway, let's look at the flavor text. I may not die quickly, certainly not from 1 damage, but at least I'm never alone. Okay. I may not die quickly. I mean, I would think that's a good thing, but then it says, but at least I'm never alone. Intriguing flavor text, but I'm not sure what it has to do with anything. And the art is confusing. I have zero idea what's happening in this art, so gonna have to rate that pretty low. Yeah, and then the hot button dealing damage, I guess, sort of makes sense. So I think that'll at least salvage it from a 0 and give it a 1 on the flavor. So not great there. Not great in that department, hot button. Yeah, so that's hot button. On to our last card. Yeah, so if you'd like to, leave a comment, so your own card can get featured in the next episode. I would appreciate if you did that because leaving comments generates engagement, and YouTube algorithm loves that. So let's see what the AI thinks about generating engagement. Here we go. Okay, here we are generating engagement. 3 and a green for an instant. Ooh, search your library for a creature card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. Okay. Pretty expensive version of this effect, but it does take it directly into the hand. So we've had Worldly Tutor before, of course. Putting a creature on top for just a single green, an instant. For 4 mana, this is, not great. But okay. It is an instant at least, so I guess you can sort hold up. And it is direct tutor, so that's pretty powerful. Generating engagement. Searches for a creature card. Kind of interesting, kind of interesting. I'm not sure what that name has to do with the effect. Maybe you can explain that in the comments and generate some engagement. That would be great. Okay, so design-wise, an instant search card in green. It does search for a creature, which is a green effect, so that's good. Like I said, it's a little on the pricey side, but being a tutor for any creature, this could be powerful, certainly. I don't know if it's ultimately that interesting. Yeah, you just search for a creature card, shove it into your hand. Does say to reveal it. That's good. That's good. That's an important instruction to have in there. Um, yeah, I mean, oftentimes green has things that put things directly into the battlefield rather than in your hand. Green Sun Zenith or Collected Company. But I don't think it's a break of the color pie. It's just a little bit different. I think this is fine design wise. I'm not like jumping up and down about it, but it it does the thing. It's a perfectly reasonable card. I guess I'll give it a 4. It's not the most inspired, but it's a little bit different than a lot of the stuff that exists. So, and it's a green effect. Fine, 4 out of 5. In terms of balance, like I said, I think it's a little bit weak at 4 mana. I would want to maybe put cards into play or have some extra effect. Just having a tutor for 4, either constructed or limited, this feels a little bit too expensive. But it's fixable. You can just lower the mana cost, not a big deal, or maybe you can put some extra effect on it. Some give it a 3 on balance. It's fine. The flavor is trickier. Let's see. This this is a very colorful art. Certainly reminds me of a YouTube comment section, so I guess kudos on that. Let's see what the flavor text is. The potential of the process is greater than the cost. Ooh. The potential of the process is greater than the cost. That's right. The potential of leaving a comment is greater than the few seconds it'll take you to type it out. Remember those words. They're important. Okay. I'm sort of into the flavor text. The art's, again, colorful. I'm not sure if I can use another word to describe it. Not sure what generating engagement has to do with looking for a creature card. So I'm gonna give it a 3 on the strength of the flavor text alone. So yeah, let's call that a 3 on flavor. I think that'll do it for generating engagement and for this episode. Appreciate you watching. If you enjoyed it, do consider generating some engagement with leaving a comment or perhaps one of the wonderful buttons down below, like and subscribe. But yeah, that'll do it. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.